Welcome to the Lost Vet podcast, where we are helping you get back to your passion and purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Melodie Chan, for another episode of Destination People. And today's topic is one that is near and dear to my heart, as I like to be recognized as a doer and somebody who works hard. However, this has often backfired on me in the past, in my career and in work, as tasks just continue to pile up to the point where I start feeling a little bit like I'm drowning. So I even once had a boss say to me, if you want something done, find the busiest person and ask them to do it. So my big question for Rob today is, how can we create a clinic environment where work is distributed more fairly amongst the team?
So this is a great question. And I think you could kind of helicopter out and really look at it from a very broad perspective before we kind of narrow down. I think, to me, what this speaks to is the contradiction or the challenge of separating out what's our priority. Is it people or is it tasks? And I think what tends to happen is we learn our lessons growing up. We learn our lessons in school. We learn our lessons in our early jobs, that hard work delivers results, right? So we work hard, we're laborious. Give me more work. You put your hand up. I know we can hyper focus on the people that don't contribute, but most people, in my experience, work really hard and want to do a great job and try and do their best every day. So in this capitalist society that we have, where work is constantly being labeled as the solution to success, I think what we're taught early on is that hard work. And when we bring that into our work life and it becomes our identity, then it becomes like this default setting. So I think organizations know that, and I think they like the fact that that's the way most people think, because they extract a huge amount of value for the investment they're making in the employee. So it's an interesting one, because you could observe it and say, well, this is something that the company needs to sort out, right? Whereas actually this is something more to do, I believe anyway, with our identity. So when we're talking about equal distribution of work, if we are constantly taking more work yet complaining about the fact of how much more work we've got, then in effect what we are is we're the victim in that scenario, and we're making ourselves the victim. And then the more it happens, the more we victimize ourselves. Almost like, oh my God, round and round and round we go. The term I'm sure is used widely, which is performance punishment. You get punished the better you perform with more work. So it's a really interesting challenge, because I think for me, philosophically, it starts with the real question is, what is our priority? What is our focus in our team? Is it people, or is it the work? And when it's the work, it's always about the work. It's about, did we get the work done? Who's doing the work? What's the deadline for the work? And it just seems never ending. And as soon as you finish, it starts again. So when you're thinking about people as your priority, that's got the potential for growth everywhere, because instead of the focus being on arbitrary finishing tasks, the focus is on developing and teaching the person so they can grow within your operation. And then what starts to happen is they feel confident and able to take on more. But also it means that you divest yourself potentially of some of the jobs that you're holding on to, because you think if you don't do it, no one's going to do it. So this, to me, and I know you're an unbelievable coach, Well, this speaks to me about coaching, because this is about how do we use the skills of coaching to enable and facilitate that free, or well, not free, but more appropriate sharing of the work, rather than the work being the priority and us holding on to it. We use the work to elevate the confidence, competence of our colleagues and ourselves to move the business forward, move the practice forward.
So to stay on that perspective then of sort of the coach and maybe somebody who's managing the people and the workload, what would be a suggestion on how I, as a manager, actually take an honest look at how the work, and I guess you said we should be maybe focusing on, you need to get the work done, but then looking at the people and honestly evaluating, and that's that mind shift, right? How do you evaluate that your people are actually being looked after and tasked with the appropriate workload, if you will?
Well, I think that's where coaching is such a nice tool, because what it asks of the person that's being coached is that they step up and demonstrate their own potential. And I think one of the things which I'm constantly writing down in notes as I'm talking to managers, and it literally happened to me yesterday evening, I'm constantly hearing the phrase, I'm trying to figure out how dot dot dot. And it's always this kind of, I'm the manager, I'm the leader, I've got to try and figure this out. And actually, a much more appropriate approach is sharing with the whole team and going, I don't know how to fix this. Say, look, I'm working longer hours. You guys seem to be like relying on me for everything, and it's not working out for either of us. You seem to be kind of bored, and I'm totally overwhelmed. Can we have a little brainstorm and talk about how we could run our team better? Can we brainstorm and talk about efficiencies? Can we brainstorm and talk about redundancies? So are there things that we should stop doing because they're no longer needed? A lot of businesses or practices, as they grow, I've seen, they're carrying on work from the old practice in a way. Maybe there was 5 people working in it and a certain protocol or certain process was relevant then. But now there's 15 working in it, but we're still using the 5-person protocol. So I think this is a constant like refreshing all of the time. What's working? What's not working? Why are we doing this way? Why should we do it that way? Like, always challenging the status quo and validating it too. If it's working, then don't try and fix it. But if it's not working, we need to be open and honest about that. So I don't know. I think I'm always hearing managers trying to solve problems, and I think in a way that's almost symptomatic of the cause, which is they're taking a disproportionate responsibility for something which actually belongs to everybody.
And that really helps, I think, in that mindset of, again, it's a more collaborative approach to figuring things out. But another thing you said that really hit was just making sure you're doing it regularly, that it's not this, even once a year might be too little. Certainly once every 3 to 5 years is not appropriate. But, making maybe even that quarterly pulse check, that it's part of that discussion. I've heard some businesses talk about how absolutely COVID was so hard for them, but surprisingly, some practices they adopted through COVID that forced them to adopt, they carried forward because it forced them to think in a new mindset. So I like that approach.
You know what? But just listening to that, it's like, what this does is it brings us back to where I started, right? If you think of it as a loop. So when you're talking about, you're quite right. Of course, we should be talking regularly. We should be communicating regularly, and communing. Actually, I misspoke, but it's true. We should be doing all of those things regularly, and we should be talking about improvement. And a lot of the times when we have meetings, it's really just to talk about problems. Like, what problems going on this week? What are you doing this week? It's all very immediate. It's all very kind of reactionary. But what you're talking about is really the truth of this. We don't have that communication to work on improvement as a priority. We treat it as something that when we have a minute, when we have time, when we get out of busy season, then we'll sit down and we'll evaluate and review. And actually, it's looked as something that sits at the end of the work. Again, the priority is the work. Let's do the work, and then we'll review how well we did it. But if you think about it from a sporting analogy, they take the complete opposite approach. If you think about the way that people become unbelievable sports people, it's because they focus a huge amount of time on improving their skills, and then they execute on the weekend, as it were. And I think I'm not saying that we should spend 5 days a week not doing any work and just talking about improvement, but it is that idea of, well, what is our focus? Are we trying to get better, or are we just trying to keep a lid on this and control it and not let it spiral out? So your point is exactly correct. It's exactly correct. But the real issue that I think I see is that communication is not a priority, and talking about these things is not a priority, and improving things is not a priority. Coping seems to be the priority. Work seems to be the priority. Execution of tasks is the priority. So it's a really big topic. That's why I said, you picked a tough question at the beginning, because we're not just talking about a simple hack like where you could try something and it'll improve things. We're actually talking philosophically about how do we think about our work, and are we utilizing the main resource, the most expensive resource, are we using it properly? The people, are we making them the priority? And if we are, then you'll find there's lots of ways to improve the work. But if we're just focused on the work, we never ever think about the people.
So flipping this around then, and from the perspective of the people, if it were, and if you're feeling like you are one of the team members that is really overtasked, really overwhelmed, and maybe you feel like you are in an environment where, this has never been discussed, it's not something you bring up, because if you do, you might be viewed as being lazy or not pulling your weight. And you may also feel that guilt that everyone else is just as busy as you, so who are you to bring this up?
Yeah.
How would you go about coaching up that person to take the next step if they're at their breaking point?
Well, there's an easy answer to this, and it's kind of it's easy, but it's hard because it flies in the face. I mean, you've outlined it beautifully. We don't do that because of all the things you've just outlined. We don't speak up. We don't raise our voice. We just kind of internalize it and squash it down. But if you are the employee, if you're part of that team, right, your leader should be observing this. And I know they may be the cause of some of this, right? They may be just like passing work on and so on. So I would always encourage people to, whenever you're given a task or given more work to do, you're the recipient of performance punishment, I would ask for clarification and prioritization from the person that's allocating it to you. And what that means is you go, okay, that sounds great. I know we talked in a previous episode about yes, but no, but. So if it's okay to sort of say, yeah, that's amazing. I'd love to help you with that. But I have all of these other things that I'm working on currently, and all these other responsibilities, which are all part of my job description. So really happy to help out. Can you help me prioritize? Because I want to make sure that I'm aligned to what is important to you. If I do that, I won't be able to have time to do this other thing. Is that okay? Right? So it's I suppose you could call it a renegotiation, just based on reality. You're not kind of saying, I'm overworked, because people tend to respond badly to that, believe it or not. It's more, if you can factualize it and make it a practical, yeah, no problem. One thing comes in, one thing goes out, just trying to keep a practical handle on my workload. That's a much easier conversation to have. I think what happens is, if I'm honest, people emotionally reject the idea that someone else can be stressed, because what they immediately do is make themselves the victim. They go, you're stressed. Look how much stuff I've got to do. And then it's like you're being ungrateful or something. Of course, everyone's working hard, but we can't forget that everyone has different stress tolerances too. Like some people can handle a lot of things, some people can handle less things, and that's okay. But we need to know what those levels are. So I would encourage you, if you are the recipient of this, take a breath, take a minute. You don't even have to continue it right in the heat of being given that work. Take a second and just list out the stuff, and then go back and look for clarification and look for prioritization. And if someone says just do all of it, well, then you say, well, then that's going to involve extra time or overtime, or it's going to mean that a couple of those things are going to be delayed. And that's just the reality of the situation. And then let the other person kind of respond to that, because you can't make more time. Certain things take a certain amount of time to complete. So if you think, to wrap that up, if we think about those duality, if we're communicating about improvement and efficiencies and redundancies of irrelevant tasks, and then we can simplify, streamline our work processes and workloads at the same time as having open, honest communication about what we're managing, all the different projects and tasks we're being asked to do. I think both of those things lead to a more open and reasonable and balanced working environment than if we don't have either of those two conversations. But the theme from what we're talking about today seems to be communication, doesn't it?
Well, this was a good one, and a lot of information and gems in this one. for those of us that feel like we're maybe suffering sometimes from that performance punishment, as Rob alluded to, where we get more work by working hard. And I think some key things to think about from both sides, whether you are the person managing the team or the employee that's feeling like you're overwhelmed, just know that you can't make more time. So how do we use our time more efficiently? And so as the team lead, taking that step back and regularly assessing, what am I keeping at the forefront as being the most important thing? Is it the task that needs to be completed, or is it my people? And again, it's putting people first and thinking in that context of evaluating what are the things you're doing day to day. Are there redundancies? Are there things that could be executed better? And more importantly, engaging your team in that conversation. So it's a collaborative effort regularly, because it's not a one and done. It's a process, and you won't, I guarantee it, you will not get it right the first time. And you may not even get it right the second or third time, but hopefully you're trending in the right direction so that you're continually improving, because your environment and just the outer factors and inner factors, your people on the team, all of these things are constantly changing. So making sure you're making communication a priority and thinking about prioritizing the people and your team as your priority to help get the work done. And if you're the person that's feeling overwhelmed and maybe just completely drowning in all of your tasks, again, thinking about taking yourself out of that victim mentality state. And I know it's hard. Take that deep breath and actually communicate it to your manager, somebody on the team that can help make a difference, but approaching it in a respectful way. And so again, just explaining your situation honestly and truthfully. And if you're being asked to do more things, then you absolutely can ask for clarification, ask for help with prioritization, and employ some of the tools we talked about in another episode and say yes, but, or no, but, and try to determine what actually needs to be done. Until next time, thanks for listening.